Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Captain Fi, the Financial Independence Podcast. G'day! Welcome to an episode of Captain Fi, the Financial Independence Podcast, where I open the cockpit to some of the best and brightest in personal finance, as well as those who've reached or are on their way to financial independence. Before we get started today, remember anything on the show is provided for general information only and should not be taken as constituting professional advice. You should always do your own research when making any financial decision. The forecast for today is property investing. The inflight meals, Smashed Avo. We're fortunate enough to have Em and Simon on the show today, the powerhouse couple behind Smashed Avo. They're an Aussie millennial couple from Sydney who like investing and brunch. Em purchased her first investment property at the incredibly young age of 18. She worked full-time straight out of school and slapped down a big 10% deposit, taking the leap to become a landlord while still in her teens. Simon, sometimes called the yin to Em's yang, was mostly interested in the stock market. He regularly invested in ETFs, shares, and managed funds. Later, seeking diversification and the power of leverage, he branched into property and secured his first investment property by the age of 24. Being together for over 8 years now, they have combined finances and purchased further residential and commercial property together. Simon is an aerospace engineer, but sometimes he sounds more like a professional daredevil with his hobbies of base jumping, canyoning, skydiving, and a myriad of other extreme sports. Simon is also a volunteer firefighter and has recently been working to extinguish some of the devastating bushfires we have had across New South Wales. Em is a thriving socialite. She loves entertaining, baking, and brunching, as well as the occasional glass of vino. She's also a very talented writer. When she's not searching the property market for great deals, she's working tirelessly behind the scenes on the blog, all the while balancing this with full-time management work and completing her master's degree in business. Okay, Smashed Avo. After listening to all that, I'm starting to feel a little inadequate myself. Maybe I have a little bit of a crush on you. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, mate.
So first up, can you guys tell us a little bit about yourself? So Simon, I hear you're a bit of a green thumb, a trait shared by many in the fire community. And Em tells me you're also pretty good at brewing your own beer.
Yeah, both true. Well, I don't know about good, but try and brew my own beer. It's something I've gone into probably in the past 12 months. I guess I like cooking, and it's a lot like cooking, and it's also like saving money, and it does save us a lot of money.
Yeah, we love the idea of living a little more sustainably as well and growing our own food. So it not only saves us money, but yeah, it can be quite difficult to source.
We'll just do that bit again.
And yes, also guilty with the gardening, especially with this isolation lately. The garden has probably doubled in size, there's a lot more growing at the moment.
It's been absolutely thriving lately. So we love growing our own food, and not only is it good for our hip pocket, but it also means that we can eat organic food just straight from the garden, which is also great. I'm also quite passionate about natural health as well. So there's that aspect with herbs and things like that. And occasionally we do love dogs. We don't have one of our own, but we do occasionally foster dogs as well.
Fantastic. I also love gardening. If you hadn't told, if you couldn't tell by some of the posts that I put up, I actually had a really good response to one of the blog articles which I wrote about growing financial independence, where we kind of talked a little bit about the growing experiments that I've had growing.
Yeah, we remember that one. That was good.
Yeah, it's so much fun. I mean, I have a very limited space, just on a balcony in an apartment in Sydney, but I still try and make it work. Mainly herbs and sort of small amounts of veggies and things for herbal teas. But it's such a fun habit, and it's so nice to just potter around in the garden.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And urban gardening is a massive movement now too, just with permaculture and that type of thing. It's really common for people in apartments to now grow their own food, which is awesome.
I think we can learn a lot from, I guess, the permaculture movement, and I think it does relate so much to, I guess, like the financial and investing community, because to me, like growing vegetables or say growing a fruit tree, it's almost the same thing as investing. You have to start somewhere, you have to tend to it, and over time, that investment or that tree will grow and provide you with fruit or dividends. So
Great
it's a
analogy.
good metaphor, mate.
absolutely. And I saw a post from someone on Instagram recently, the Slow Fast, and she actually had put this amazing post up, actually likening the stock market to an orange tree. And she went through and talked about, how if the tree is providing you oranges and food, why do you care if someone values that differently from day to day? Like, are you really going to get rid of the orange tree just because somebody tells you it's worth less today than it is yesterday, but it's still producing you oranges? So, yeah, it really struck a chord, and I really like that analogy.
For
Yeah,
sure.
nice.
So, first up, how did you guys get so good with money? Like, you're clearly killing it on the property front. ETFs, like I've been reading the blog, I've been looking at your Instagram posts, and you seem pretty all over it. I mean, was there anything in particular with your upbringing that helped your mindset, or were there any defining moments in your lives when you guys each realized you needed to start investing to get ahead?
Yeah, well, I think so. Individually, we both grew up reasonably money conscious. My parents were, somewhat frugal, but they also knew the value of money, and they taught myself and my sister the value of money. And they invested quite heavily in property, and as well as my sister and I's education. Um, and they were really supportive when I was growing up and took an interest in money. And my dad was my number one support when I actually did go ahead and buy my first investment property when I was 18. So had I not had that support from my parents, I think it would have been really difficult.
Yeah, we pick up a lot of our money habits from our parents, and I guess that's really amazing that you had such a supportive family and a supportive father who was able to help you to navigate. Because it can be pretty intimidating, especially looking at your first real estate deal.
Oh, absolutely. And I think negotiating that entire negotiation process and, understanding whether or not it was in fact a sound purchase, for someone that is so young, and essentially it was my life savings that I was putting down to purchase this property. It was quite an intimidating time, but, having a support network around you, be it your parents or friends, it really does help when taking the leap into the property market.
So I also grew up in I guess, pretty frugal household, being a farming background in country Victoria. So that sort of shaped how I thought about money. Our family wasn't super into investing. So basically, when I started working, I was still saving as much money as I could, but I didn't really do anything with it. I dabbled in shares for a bit, but basically just sat on a very large savings account that sat in the bank for a couple of years. So, without a doubt, Em is 100% responsible for educating me and making me realise, I guess, the benefits of property.
Yeah, never forget that.
So Em, what about stocks? So has Simon taught you a little bit about the stock market?
Absolutely, yeah. I never really dabbled in shares, mostly actually because my family had quite a bad experience with shares and where they lost a reasonable amount of money. So just the volatility of the share market really worried me and freaked me out. So I didn't really get into shares until Simon sort of was able to hold my hand, so to speak. And I do often go to him for my advice, which, you know, I don't advocate for other people, but I do trust him and he does walk the talk, so to speak. So I trust in what he recommends. So yeah, he's definitely been the linchpin for me in terms of investing my own personal money in shares, but we do also have a reasonable amount of money that is joined as well. So yeah, it's only a small amount of money that I have in my own share portfolio.
Okay, and that can be a pretty big thing for couples, joining finances. So you guys have been together for a long time. How did you know when it was sort of, I guess, time to join finances, and do you track your spending, and sort of how do you manage the expectations of each other's?
Yeah, so the joining finances, again, full credit to Em for pushing us in that direction. I mean, realistically, a couple, you know, you can sort of tell early on whether you're going to be around long term or short term. So for us, it was definitely looking long term, and it still is. So combining finances was a really good move back then, because it's almost, you know, the more equity you can bring in to an investment situation, it really does compound. So by having two people combine incomes and combine finances, it doesn't just double your position. It almost sort of triples. Um, it's really that compounding effect with what you can do, and it's like everything. Banks will lend you more money if you're a pair as opposed to an individual. You know, there's really a lot of benefits to doing it early on.
Yeah, it's certainly been beneficial for us. And I remember when I was thinking about broaching the subject with Simon about combining finances, and I had a little speech in my head, and I was going to run through, you know, the benefits of combining finances. And then one night over a bottle of wine, we just sat down and we just started speaking about it. And yeah, it was awkward, I suppose, because I was in debt. So I had an investment property that was bringing in cash flow. So it was positively geared property. But Simon had a lump sum of capital. So there were obvious benefits, I suppose, in combining our finances at that time. But I think it was also just knowing that you have someone to support you through any financial difficulties and that kind of thing as well. It just gives you the confidence to then go and purchase more property or invest. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So when you say you had a positively geared property, so that means all of the cost of managing that property, the mortgage, maintenance, all of those sort of fees that you might not think about, even once you'd accounted for all of those, it was still making you money every week.
That's right. So each week or monthly, when I got the rental returns from my property manager, I would end up with, you know, a few $100s, which wasn't, you know, a huge amount, but the loan was quite small. But I would end up with a few $100s in my back pocket that I could either use to put back into the loan, which would then reduce my repayments, or if I had a large expense that I needed to pay for, it was just a little bit of extra money in the bank.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Is investing, getting those returns, and using that to increase your position and eventually to live off the returns. When I first discovered FIRE, or financial independence, where you invested and eventually the returns from your investment, or in your case, that couple of $100 that you made profit at the end of the month, if you had enough investments or enough, say, properties that were providing you those couple of $100 each, that you might even be able to live off that and not have to work a conventional job. Well, that was like a penny dropping, light bulb illuminating and exploding over my head. It blew my mind. And it really opened up a huge amount of possibility for me. Is that something that you were thinking of when you started your investment journey?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I actually only discovered that FIRE had a name when we established Smashed Avo on Instagram. I didn't know that there was an actual term to coin it. And we'd both sort of already been working towards that stage, but I suppose it was just interesting that you could put a name around it. But again, my dad had been talking about this concept since I was little. So the concept of being able to live off rental returns and for your investments to continually build equity was something that I was, thinking about from a young age anyway. And I think FIRE just sort of was able to define that a little bit more and, yeah, I suppose just put a little bit more context around it.
So you're clearly killing it now. You've got multiple properties, you've got your business, and you are also investing in ETFs and index funds. You mentioned you both got your properties fairly young, but can you tell us now how your investing journey has sort of changed over time, and what is your current investing strategy?
I don't know if it's how much it's changed over time, but we've certainly grouped it together in terms of goals, and now we sort of have a very clear strategy. At the start, it was just all about accumulation and just trying to invest as much as we can, but with no real goal in mind. So I guess that's where the discovering the FIRE movement has been quite beneficial, because we've been able to use a lot of the resources that, a lot of the information that's out there, and really come up with some goals and actually understand how much we need in order to live on. So, our fundamental strategy is just cash flow. So, everything we're after is about positively geared investments, be it property, where we don't buy shares, for example, that don't return dividends. So our whole strategy is about buy and hold, and it's about cash flow. And then the more cash we have, the more we invest, and it's hopefully a nice exponential curve.
Yeah, it's like a snowball. It sort of starts off as a bit of a trickle of investment returns, and over time it just sort of grows and becomes a bit of a raging torrent, and eventually you can harvest that and live off it. So what is your goal then? You mentioned that previously you were just looking to invest as much as possible. Do you have a long-term financial goal?
So our rough FIRE number would be an investment portfolio of about $2.5 million. That's just very simply using the 4% rule for an income that we believe we can live off. That's taking into account full-blown retirement. We honestly probably wouldn't retire. Once we achieve that FIRE number, the plan wouldn't just be to quit the jobs or all work completely for the rest of our lives and just sit around sipping lattes. We still want to work. There's still things that interest us, but I guess what it would mean is that we wouldn't be chasing money. You wouldn't look at a job purely for its income perspective. You'd just be like, would I enjoy this or would I not?
I think that as well, it also allows us it opens up some opportunities. So, for instance, we would love to live on a big bit of land with a farm and build our own house, that kind of thing. It really just allows us the opportunity and to be able to do that. So it's less about, we're going to retire at this age and then live frugally for the rest of our lives. Like, that's not really the type of people that we are. So our investment strategy is that we are able to have passive income for the rest of our lives, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't go out and seek our own money. So whether that's that we start a business or whatever it may be in the future, it's just that number is just a guide, I suppose.
It's like the ultimate safety net.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's a really good way of putting it. And, you do see sometimes it get referred to as FU money. And there are so many stories of people who build up their passive income and build up their investments. And now they have that safety net. They can take that to their employer and ask for better paying conditions, or, they feel much more safe in risking what they have for, say, a promotion or switching roles or starting a business. So yeah, I think that's a really great way of looking at it. So speaking about property specifically, you guys have a fantastic portfolio of, mixed commercial and residential real estate. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey on property investing fundamentals and some of the strategies that you are using?
Yeah, for sure. So, as we mentioned before, so our property portfolio is generally all positively geared. For tax purposes, we may start looking at a neither positively nor negatively geared property, just to sort of assist in tax, for our tax reasons. But we generally will look at positively geared properties with very low vacancy rates. So a suburb that's a quite strong suburb, so it needs to have a reasonable population, generally over about 5,000 people, with very low vacancy rates, and ideally a council that's really proactive in building infrastructure, good roads, good schools, those kinds of things.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so you would stay away from some of those boom and bust mining towns? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are places in Tasmania, towns, that you can buy a property, a shack, that returns you 25%.
Wow.
But it's so, there's just so much risk involved with that side of the house. So we've got a real cookie cutter style of property that we aim for. So there's the suburb side, that's all the things that Em just spoke about. But then the house itself, you generally want to go for, the worst house on the best street. It's an old metaphor, but it does actually work. Reasonably new. We don't like really old properties because there's not a whole lot of depreciation you can generally claim. And they generally, towards the end of, or as a property starts to age, the maintenance costs and the costs to actually maintain that property really start to ramp up as well. So we generally like the younger properties. We're not massive fans on brand spanking new ones. More so just because it's hard to tell what a suburb or a development or an area is going to be like if everything's so new. It almost needs a few years to like bed in, and then you can sort of figure out the market. But yeah, they're just a few of the things that we look at. But it's a numbers game more than anything. So it's really important just to take emotion out of it. Which we're still guilty of. I very, very nearly put an offer in on a place the other day, just because I fell in love with its polished oak floorboards. But realistically, it is just a numbers game, and if the numbers add up and it looks like a good investment from an analytical point of view, then it most likely is a really good investment.
Yeah, okay, definitely. So solid fundamentals. You have a systemized approach where you are looking at suburbs, neighborhoods, streets, looking for the worst house on the best street. So the worst house on the best street. So you guys are not afraid of a fixer-upper.
I don't know about a fixer-upper. When I say the worst house on the best street, it would more be, so again, because we're going on these sort of younger houses, a lot of the time, it might just be something as simple as a non-landscaped, front and backyard, or, there's just something about the property. Maybe it's a couple of years old and they haven't quite finished it. They it hasn't quite been looked after, but it's got really good bones. I guess if you fixer-upper, that's when you head towards your renovation territory, which is somewhere that we're not quite at just yet. But yeah, I guess there's you can tell a lot about the potential of an area just by looking at the houses on either side. Comparing prices that way, and just trying to get a feel for the general area, in terms of how much pride people have in their houses, for example.
I like that you did say fixer-upper though, because it is certainly an area that we are looking to move into, and I suppose it's a different kind of investment strategy. There are people that flip houses and they renovate for profit. It's all about cosmetic renovations, and that is potentially an area that we might look to head into just in the new, I guess, as we're getting a little older and we're moving into a different stage of our lives. It's certainly a challenge that I think we would be really interested in doing and completing. So there's certainly in the near future that could be happening. So.
Okay, so your main focus is to look for solid, stable, cash flow positive, reliable properties, and perhaps something that you can add value to in a small way, and you're going to look to maybe expand into that renovation territory.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Yeah, well done.
Fantastic. So for myself, I'm currently working on a duplex project to build, and the goal is to have a couple of tenants in there, and the numbers indicate that everything seems to be cash flow positive. We'll see how that turns out over the next year during the build, and that's another sort of what's called residential property. I personally don't have any commercial properties, and it's something that I don't really know a lot about. But you guys mentioned you have a commercial real estate.
Yeah, so we have a commercial property, so it's an office. We purchased that last year, I think it was. It was the very first time we'd bought a commercial property. So we did actually go through a buyer's agent for that, just because we weren't quite sure on the different idiosyncrasies around purchasing commercial, and it is quite different to purchasing residential. So that said, in terms of our fundamental due diligence, there was no difference really. As long as it was in a solid area, the property is, well maintained, quite new. We also had to look though at strata costs, and how that was quite different to what we're used to with residential. But we found a great place, and the yield is fantastic. And something that is quite different with commercial is it was a 30% deposit on the loan, so it was quite a lot of upfront money. But the rent that we get is all of the expenses and outgoings are actually paid by the tenant, so that's quite different to residential. But yeah, if you're thinking of expanding into commercial, then I would definitely seek some advice, because it is quite different. But ultimately, the way that it is structured, it is quite similar in terms of the way that the yield that we're getting from it, as opposed to our residential properties.
And there is a bit more risk involved. There's no doubt about that. So, if that property was to become vacant, that asset would then start costing us a lot of money annually, just because of the strata costs and insurance and everything else. So, which is currently all covered by the tenant. So yeah, you have to be pretty sure about the area, and the likelihood of that becoming vacant. Commercial leases are very different to residential leases, and the lease is generally something that can be negotiated as part of the purchase of the property as well. So, it was a massive learning curve for us. We probably at this stage wouldn't buy another commercial property in our portfolio right now. Definitely down the track, because it's just so cash flow positive. But because of the increased risk, we'd probably, the next couple of properties will be residential, just to sort of give us that safety net and that padding. And then 100% will go commercial again down the track.
And it's also an opportunity cost as well. So 30% deposit, if you were willing to pay LMI, that's potentially 3 residential properties that you could purchase with the same amount of capital that you would need to start a commercial loan. So there is quite, there's some pros and cons. And like Simon mentioned, it's not really on our, it's not in the short term for our goals right now, but definitely in the future.
With all of these properties and shares and other investments, it can be tricky to keep track of everything. You mentioned you had joined your finances, which is a great move for couples, especially in Australia, when it comes time for things like tax, sharing of income, and those kind of factors. I'm also personally in the process of setting up just some discretionary trusts and also company structures for my personal businesses and investments. But I found at times it can be super confusing. The Aussie Firebug actually recently wrote a really good article on it. Do you use trusts and company structures at all when you with your portfolio?
Yeah, so we do, and it is really confusing, and I just feel so sorry for our poor accountant, because she's had to step us through holding our hand sort of through the entire process. So we've got both a trust and a company, which is a trustee to the trust. And we originally had these set up because there was an opportunity for a joined commercial residential property that we were actually in the process of purchasing. But unfortunately, that purchase fell through because the vendor pulled out. So we ended up sort of going through this entire rigmarole to get a trust in a company set up. And then unfortunately, the purchase fell through. So there was really no need for us to have sort of set that all up. But we can definitely now use that to our advantage.
So we're probably looking at now transitioning and from this point on starting to accumulate assets under the trust. There's a lot of benefits that come with using that trust company structure, which we're still learning about. We're still discovering. And for us, the benefits are really starting to stack up. So that's sort of the path we're heading down. Like Em said, we didn't initially intend to set the trust in the company up. It just sort of was almost forced on us by a purchase, or a potential purchase, which unfortunately fell through. But now that we've got it, we're sort of realising how beneficial they can be. So we are sort of thankful that we sort of just fell into this position. But yeah, it's definitely something that I encourage people that sort of at that same stage to look into. Have that conversation with your accountant. If it's something that can be advantageous to your own situation, then definitely go for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for beginners. It's not probably something that you would set up at the outset if you're starting investing, but a discretionary trusts are actually really quite common, particularly for people, that are doctors, that need asset protection and things like that. So I think it's more common than people think to have a trust. But yeah, we had no idea about that when we first signed up to it. So,
speaking of structuring finances, what about retirement accounts? So in Australia, we have our superannuation, which is, I guess, equivalent to an American 401k, and it's essentially a tax-sheltered investment vehicle that's intended to cover your cost of living in retirement. So what are your thoughts on super, and do you contribute anything extra to that at all?
Yeah, so we're sort of quite lucky that we're offered a very good super scheme through our work, which we try and take full advantage of. So we both salary sacrifice. So we sacrifice 10% of our salary into super, and that's 5% before tax and 5% after tax. So yeah, I sat down, we sat down a while ago and did a whole bunch of maths and sort of figured out the pros and cons of the long-term superannuation investment and the pros and cons of salary sacrificing. And yeah, you can basically structure your input in a really, I guess, a tax positive way, or a tax minimization sort of strategy there.
So I remember actually seeing some super statements come through, and Simon opened up his and I opened up mine, and I realized he had almost doubled what I had in super because, when I first started in the workforce, I didn't really think about super. I didn't give it a second thought. I thought, oh, well, that'll, I'll need that money when I'm 50, 55. I don't really need to worry about it now. So I think when I was young, I didn't actually put as much time and effort into understanding super. So it hasn't been since maybe the last 2 years that I've actually really started focusing on my super and contributing more. So, yeah, definitely one for all the young players out there to focus on your super, because it actually does, it can increase very quickly. So yeah, something that I really wish that I'd done as a younger person.
And it's just another investment in your portfolio, but the best part about it is it's one that you don't have to actively manage. So it ticks all the boxes of a good investment. It grows. It provides a a return. The catch is that it obviously only provides that return once you hit a certain age. It's everyone should. And I went for many years not understanding superannuation and not understanding my own super account. But it just got to that point where it's like it's ridiculous that an investment, so big, I don't know anything about. So I sort of spent a lot of time learning about super, which was again another massive learning curve. But yeah, it is a great investment. Obviously, depending on what scheme you're on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realise you can actually go into whichever super company you're kind of using, or whatever your employer is using, and choose the different types of investing aggressiveness, I suppose. So you can actually go in and say that you want to be more conservative, or if you want to take a little more risk, maybe you're younger, maybe you have a little bit more time to work up a bit more super, you can aggressively invest. So there are different kinds of investment types within super accounts that I think people don't even really realize that you can actually affect that, and you have influence over that.
Absolutely. And I think my two top tips for super is, just like you've mentioned, the percentage of stocks to bonds and cash, or sometimes it's called fixed interest. So the first thing that I did was crank that bad boy up to the maximum aggressiveness, which I don't remember the word. I think it might even be called very aggressive or highly aggressive on mine. Be aggressive, be aggressive. And so that pretty much cranks that up to about 100% stocks, or sometimes it's called 100% equities or 100% shares. And that way I'm not my portfolio is not being dragged down by the very, very low yields on fixed interest and cash and bonds. And then the second thing is really pay attention to your fees. So there are some, not all super schemes are the same. Some of them have really, really high fees, and those fees are going to eat away at your returns. So
absolutely, I actually experienced that firsthand. I was working at a place called RP Data for a few years, and I didn't roll the super from that account into my new super account. And I got a text message from the tax office the other day saying that $6.51 had been deposited into my account, because that was all that was left over from my super.
Oh, wow.
I failed to roll it over. So unfortunately, and I'd worked to over $1,000 that was in there. So just purely because, I either A, forgot, or I didn't really care because super is super, whatever. I essentially, because I wasn't sort of on top of it, I lost all that money, I suppose, which was really upsetting. So
yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, there was the Royal Commission into Financial Misconduct, and super and the fees was a huge topic and outcome on that. There's a lot of really good articles that came out of that you can read online. One of, I guess, the really nefarious things that I learned that came out of that, and something that I'm actually super grateful that never happened to me. So I've taken numerous flying jobs, and similar to your story, Em, I did earn some super they were in various accounts. And just like you, my super balances got eaten away, down to nothing, where I essentially got a letter saying, hey, your account's now closed because there's nothing in it. And it also said, hey, by the way, you are no longer eligible for insurance because your super account is, zero. So your policy is suspended. And that got me thinking, I'm like, policy? Health insurance? Like, that's not really something I'd ever thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually turns out that some of these superannuation policies, well, most actually, have life insurance or medical insurance, health insurance plans attached to them. And that's where a lot of the fees can actually come out of.
Yeah,
And
wow.
yeah, and it actually turned out that had I, had an injury, crashed a plane, thankfully none of the accidents that I was ever in resulted in injuries. But had those accidents resulted in injury or like a total or permanent impairment, the superannuation companies or the insurance policies behind those super accounts, they will actually bicker amongst themselves, and having multiple super accounts can actually void the health insurance, and you can actually end up getting nothing.
Wow,
So
that's really
that was
interesting.
it was absolutely terrifying for me to read. And so that kind of predatory behavior amongst some of the financial institutions was put on display and sort of put under the spotlight during the Royal Commission. So thankfully, there are some really awesome resources through ASIC, which is the Australian government website about money, and ASIC's Money Smart. There's a heap of great resources for particularly young Australians to learn a little bit more about the super and maybe anything that's sort of lurking underneath the surface there.
Absolutely, and I think you can even find lost super as well if you're not quite sure. If you...
I'm going to be claiming my $6 as well.
Absolutely.
So I really like your blog. You guys are clearly passionate about personal finance, and you have a real knack for this kind of stuff. I see the way you identify with your readership and your viewer base is really good. You set a great example. You, Em and Simon, you both balance your saving and investing with enjoying a really nice quality of life. And it looks like you've hit the sort of perfect sweet spot and struck a real chord with your readers. And particularly what made me think of this is superannuation and the way you present your articles. It's for a beginner, and it's so easy for someone to take your information and then become interested and passionate and actually like strike up a bit of a spark for wanting to fix, maybe some shortcomings in finances, or maybe you don't understand investing. What sort of led you into wanting to help nurture this within people and sort of share your knowledge of how to start?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for checking out our blog. We actually need to get a little bit more content up. We've recently been a little bit quiet, but we originally had the idea for Smashed Avo because we were both being individually asked by our friends for opinions on properties or shares that they might have been looking at buying. So we found the finance community on Instagram, and yeah, we just sort of decided to start sharing our tips, and it's mostly just developed from there.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the big light bulb moments, certainly for me, is that it's beneficial to give someone information or help on their investing journey. Yes, it's beneficial to them, but it's also very beneficial to everyone else. So to advise or to encourage someone to go and buy an investment property, that's stimulating the economy, that's growing that's driving growth in property itself. Like, there's so many benefits to everyone by more and more people investing, if that makes sense. So I guess that's a lot of people. Well, I guess I'm sort of guilty of maybe wanting to keep knowledge to myself in the past, but that was the real sort of turning point, is realizing, well, no, by encouraging and helping other people on their investment path, it helps everyone. It helps the country, it helps us, it helps them. It's really a positive all around.
I think another thing too is with financial advice, it can be, it's sort of a really fine line because it's a very regulated industry. So we can't go out and provide financial advice to individuals because we are simply not financial advisors. We can only sort of tell people and, speak on our experience only. So that's sort of where it's all kind of come from, I suppose, is just we've been interested in money, and I think it's something that young people are not super interested in generally. They're interested in having a lot of it, but not necessarily in, ways to make it outside of your conventional 9 to 5. And so I think there's, a fair bit of misinformation or there can be some scary people out there too, and we definitely encountered them at the start of our journey, where there are people that are trying to make the most of your ignorance and naivety too. So it's just sort of like putting it out there to young people to say, hey, we are just normal people, so everyone can do this. It's not because we are earning ridiculous amounts of money like we have our conventional 9 to 5, we're earning a pretty standard amount of money, that, this is an opportunity for people that are like us to go out and, better their lives and have more opportunities and earn money outside of your normal, I suppose, in inverted commas, normal job.
Fantastic. So before we started recording, I wanted to ask you to have a think about the top 3 tips you would give someone who was wanting to reach financial independence. So you've had a little bit of time to think. What do you reckon?
So I guess, first and foremost, you need to get your shit in the pile. There's no other real way of putting it. So, personal high interest debts, so like credit card debts or high interest car loans, we never ever touch them with a 10-foot pole, but if you have them, they need to go. They need to just get paid off as quickly as you can, because regardless how much you make investing, you will never make enough to counter like a 17% personal loan, for example. So that's the first step, is to just get your life together, pay off high interest personal loans, and then build yourself a bit of a buffer. So the big thing is emergency funds, and there's a lot of every strategy seems to talk about emergency funds, but as recent events have highlighted, emergency funds are actually pretty important. So you want access to liquid to money, to whether you have investments that can be easily converted into cash, whether you just have a bank account with, I don't know, $1,000 in it that you just don't touch and it just sits there. You do need to build yourself in a bit of a safety buffer. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is, again, a bit arty-farty, but you do need to invest according to your strategy. So which means you need a strategy, and your strategy is defined by what your goals are. So I guess you sort of have to work before you even hit the buy button on some ETFs, or start signing contracts for houses. You need to sort of figure out what your goals are, and then it's like, okay, well, how do I get to that goal? And then you come up with a strategy. So these can vary just wildly between people. So you need to stay focused. Focus on your goal. Don't get caught up by what other people are doing. Obviously, take on information and learn. Like always learn. But don't get sidetracked by what other people are doing.
I think the last tip, and it's probably not one that, financial advisors would necessarily love, but it's really important to us and it really resonates with us, and that's to enjoy your journey. I think it's all great to, be super frugal and that kind of thing, but if it's stopping you from doing the things that you love, then what's it all worth? Money is an important tool and we can use it to our advantage, but we also need to enjoy the journey and we need to enjoy our lives. You're only, YOLO, you only live once, and you're only this young once too. So yeah, I think you just need to find your own balance between saving, investing, but also enjoying your money too. So I think it's, one of our loves, I suppose, is brunch. So, we justify the expense every now and then to go out for brunch because we enjoy doing that. And you might like flying. So in your case, you might justify that while it's expensive, it's something that you do love to do, or whatever your hobbies may be. I think it's just really important to understand why you're saving money in the first place is because you want to be able to enjoy it.
Absolutely. No, I think that's some really good tips. And I really appreciate you sharing it. It's often something that we can get really wound up on. I know, like myself, my background at uni studying engineering and mathematics. I can be very analytical. I can be very numbers based, and I can weirdly get super satisfied by trying to squeeze my grocery budget down just as low as it can go. And it's almost like a bit of a game, but at the same time, you probably do need to balance that sort of hyper frugalness with, enjoying yourself from time to time.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Don't get us wrong. We've definitely played the how far can our grocery bill squeeze us game as well. It wasn't super fun, but yeah, it's pretty natural, I think, for us people that, really interested in saving money. But
so, look, guys, that really covers a lot of the questions that I had written down that I wanted to ask you. I guess we've been meaning to have this chat for quite a while, and between when we actually sort of first made contact and broached the idea about running the podcast, the markets obviously had a pretty big downturn, and we might even see ourselves in a bit of a bear market. Who knows, with this whole corona virus lockdown. What are your thoughts on, I guess, the virus and its impact on not only, I guess, the share market, which has seen quite a significant correction, but also other assets like property?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. We track our net worth, and the property market sort of hasn't been super affected as yet, but definitely our share portfolio has lost value. We haven't lost a cent of money per se because we haven't sold. If we were to freak out and sell all our shares, then yes, we would lose money, but our portfolio has lost value. Obviously the share market's been the real talk lately because that's where we've been seeing some pretty significant losses. You look all throughout history. Basically, we have these periods of growth. Like the share market is never linear, so it doesn't grow linearly over time. It ramps up and then it has to correct because it can't just keep growing up on a more exponential curve. So we have these seems to have these market corrections. So for the past, I think if you average out the growth in the past like 30 to 40 years on the stock market, it's like 9.2%. So, that's the average growth if you're in the stock market long term, which is what we are. So, honestly, we are, it's a little bit, I guess, sad to look at your net worth drop. But realistically, I don't see us as having lost a single cent, simply because we buy and hold. So we buy good dividend paying stocks and ETFs, to then hold us in the long term. And like you say, our orange tree, it's currently still producing oranges. So the fact that, the orange tree market might be, worth a bit less, and our tree might be a bit devalued at the moment, where we're certainly not about to go digging it out.
I think as well we're quite lucky in that we both have retained our jobs, so we've still got a regular income coming in. One area that has been slightly affected is our commercial property, as can be expected. So, the bank has essentially stopped us paying our mortgage on our commercial loan, which, is great for the banks to take the initiative to go ahead and do that. We did get a late payment rental income this month, but the company that's in there is actually quite stable. So we are lucky in that respect. So I think, with everything that's going on, it can be very difficult for people, particularly if they've lost their jobs. But like Simon said, you don't actually lose money in the stock market, particularly unless you sell. So if people have the capacity to hold on to their shares, then they should see them start to go up at some point. When that will be, how long's a piece of string, but the market will recover. So I think that's just important mentally for people to remember right now.
So with that in mind, and I always try and avoid sort of starting to talk about politics and that kind of stuff, because you end up going down the rabbit hole. But with that in mind, what do you think about the Morrison government initiative to allow people to withdraw from their superannuation?
100% can see the reasons behind it. And I think it almost goes without saying. If there are people out there that need cash for the absolute basics, for the life essentials, it just goes without saying. Like if you need money just to put food on the table, then yes, 100%. I think that's completely valid. But there are a lot of sort of talk. And we've had a bunch of questions from friends being like, oh, well, should I pull money out and maybe invest it myself? Pull the 10 grand out of super and, buy some shares with it, or, put it down for a house deposit. That's when I think people need to be really, really careful. And, super, like we discussed earlier, it's such just a safe, easy, reliable investment, that I think you'd really have to be confident in your numbers to make that withdrawal. And that's something like we haven't even crunched the numbers, because for us it's out of the question. We would not touch our super.
That's very similar to obviously what I think. I saw a funny meme, and it said something to like, coronavirus, don't touch your face, don't touch your super.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. If you need the essentials, we're talking rent, food, utilities, to provide for your family, then I can see how, if you are in that position, then that might be something that you consider. It's unfortunately going to be a very difficult time for a lot of Australians and for a lot of people around the world. At some point, it does sort of feel a little bit. I do feel a little bit guilty for, I guess, talking about finances and money and investing. It can sometimes feel a little bit insensitive. But I guess make no mistake, if you are disciplined and prepared, this could present itself as a fantastic opportunity for your long-term financial wealth.
Yeah, and certainly with the stock market, we're seeing some really solid, real blue chip investments out there that pay, potentially not this year, but normally pay solid, reliable dividends, and they're currently all a lot cheaper than they were a couple of weeks ago. So, again, for people that are wanting those real, those buy and hold strategies with their share portfolio, then I'm not saying try and time the market, but now would be, a good time to buy.
As good a time as any, really, But I'm really interested to actually see what the property market does in the next month to 3 months. So typically the property market does lag behind shares. Obviously shares are quite volatile. Property, being bricks and mortar, takes a little longer. So I would be interested to see in the next few months as to how the property market's affected, because there could be some opportunities there. Obviously remembering that every suburb has its own microeconomy, and there are, properties booming at different times as others. So, I think, it should be really interesting to potentially check out some opportunities in the next couple of months from a property perspective.
So I guess our real superpower at the moment is an ability to live well below your means, and that is going to give you the opportunity to maybe take advantage of some of these great investment opportunities that might present themselves in the near future.
For sure. I think as well, social isolation is certainly helping our hip pocket. There's no, pubs to go and sample craft beers at hotel anymore. So it's certainly helping our expenses, which while it's getting a little bit like Groundhog Day, it is certainly helping the hip pocket.
I don't know about you guys, but I've never baked so much banana bread in my life.
I'll have you know, I baked orange poppy seed cupcakes with lime buttercream the other day.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, pretty tasty. But also our gym is closed, so this is problematic.
Well, you might need to pick yourself up some gym equipment on Gumtree.
Or maybe just go for a good old-fashioned run.
That is technically free.
Exactly.
So, Simon and Em, thanks so much for the chat today. It's been so much fun. Before I let you guys go, is there anything else you'd like to talk about today?
I think we've covered all bases. I'm sure there'll be some. We'll have to catch up again in the future. I don't know, maybe on the other side of this crisis, and talk about where we're headed from there. But I think that's all we've got for today.
I am totally down for that, guys. I'm really looking forward to maybe sampling some of that craft beer and some of those poppy seed scones that you just talked about. For anyone who wants to get in touch with you guys, what's the best way for people to find you guys online?
Yeah, so just through our Instagram at smash.avo_. So much shameless plugs going on here. smashavoaustralia.com.
I might just re-record that last little section just so I don't have to edit it.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll just close the windows. We've just got a mower outside.
Bloody mowers.
Bloody mowers. Oh wow, they're really loud. Sorry.
How's that? Can you still hear the mower in the background?
Nah, can't hear shit, right? That's good. For anyone who wants to track you guys down online or get in touch, what's the best way to find you guys?
Yeah, so we're mostly active on our Instagram account, so at smashed.avo_. We also have a blog, so that's at www.smashedavoaustralia.com. But we're always more than happy for people to DM us on Instagram. We absolutely love having a chat. So yeah, that's definitely the best place to reach us.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Captain Fi Financial Independence Podcast. To read the transcript or check out the show notes, head over to www.captainfi.com for all the details. If you have a question for the captain, make sure to get in touch. You might even make it on the airwaves. You can reach me online through the Captain Fi contact form or get in touch through the socials. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, as well as a number of online finance and investing forums. And finally, remember, the information presented on the show and the links provided are for general information purposes only. They should not be taken as constituting professional financial advice. You should always do your own research when making any financial decisions and make sure it's appropriate for your personal circumstance.